Hi, and welcome to the Nonprofit Matters podcast, brought to you by #Nonprofit, the show where we tackle real, complex, and often unspoken challenges of working in South Africa's nonprofit sector. From ethical dilemmas and leadership struggles, to funding cuts, legal hurdles, and burnout, this is a space for honest conversation about what it really takes to keep doing good. This podcast is made possible thanks to the generous support of the LV and Ivy Middleton Charitable Trust. We're grateful for their partnership in helping us create a platform where the sector can reflect, share, and find new ways forward.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Nonprofit Matters podcast. I'm your host for this episode. My name is Sarah Scarth, and I'm the Executive Director of Operation Smile. And I'm also a board member of #Nonprofit. Now, today our topic is nonprofit legal essentials. And we're going to be talking about compliance, structure, and the rules nonprofits can't afford to ignore. So it's all the stuff that we really want to ignore, but we just can't. And I'm just delighted to be joined today by Ricardo, Wyngaard, and Nicole Copley, who really are just incredible servants in our sector and have deep and rich knowledge in this area. So we really are delighted to be joined by both of them today. So thank you, Nicole and Ricardo, for joining us. And to kick off, won't you both introduce yourself to our audience and also just share with us what keeps you passionate about the sector that you've both been part of for, 30 years plus. So yeah, Nicole, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody. And it's such a pleasure to be here and with these colleagues, including the venerable Ricardo Wyngaard. The two of us work together quite often. And we have different styles, but the same, I think, kind of passion, as you've said, Sarah, for the work in the sector. I am the founder of NGO Law. I have been working in the sector since the early 90s. I've kind of stopped counting the years now. And I have a little boutique kind of consultancy that works just for non-profits. Some paralegals, a handful of lawyers. And this is our sole focus and expertise: setups, registrations, compliance, governance, all that kind of stuff that most people think is terrifically boring and don't want to look at. So we do it instead. And I fell into working in the nonprofit sector by mistake, really. I was a young lawyer at a big corporate law firm. I was unaware of how deeply unhappy I was in big corporate law, and I did some work for some nonprofits, and I think it got addictive. It just got addictive. And I think I'm addicted to the passion and the creativity that there is in the sector, to the unfailing, unceasing ability of the nonprofit sector to rebound in crisis, to come up with new ways to fix things, to just the grit. I just so admire nonprofit founders and nonprofit organizations that just keep going in really often very adverse circumstances. And that's what inspires me, is I want to be more like them, I suppose. And to have those kinds of open hearts but clear heads that also say, let's just get this stuff done. Yeah, I love it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nicole. Ricardo.
Hi, Sarah, and good day to everyone. So, interestingly, I also stumbled across the nonprofit sector. I recall, when I started working at the nonprofit sector, I was actually working at the Legal Resources Center. And at the time, the list of public benefit activities, the draft list was published, and we had workshops, and I was completely new to the sector, and somehow the practitioners that were working in the field, they were out of action, including Nicole. So now they called on me, the newcomer, and they told those attending, this is our expert. And I was young, naive, and I actually liked the concept of an expert. And only to start to dislike it when people started to ask questions. And I said to Eugene Saldana, I said to him, look, rather not call me an expert. I don't like these difficult questions. But what I liked was working in the sector. Very, very exciting, to just work with different people who are working at community level, at advocacy level, and focusing on, their unique objectives, making a difference in the lives of people. So I must just mention that, Eugene Saldana, he actually encouraged me to work in the sector. And I just wanted to pay tribute to him as well. And to Nicole, really, when I looked at Nicole's practice, I realized that, it is possible for a legal practitioner to focus on this field. And the reality is that you go to university, there's no non-profit law being studied at university. So you basically have to, you have to craft your own pathway. And I was one of the ones that followed in the footsteps of, Nicole, who basically showed us that, look, you can create a sustainable practice focusing on non-profit organizations. So, and it's been an amazing experience. Really, it has been. So, thank you to Nicole, and also for the cordial relationship. It makes it more exciting. Usually when you work in with other attorneys, it could be, for the most part, an acrimonious relationship. You argue, you fight in court. It's not really what I like. I like this kind of relationship. It's really awesome.
Yeah. So
awesome. Wow, that's amazing. And I know you work extremely well together. You help one another, but you work collaboratively to better serve organizations. And I think doing that in a very efficient, cost-effective way. So let's dive straight in, and let's kick off with what most nonprofits are challenged with every single day, and that is generating income to sustain their work so that they could continue to achieve greater social impact. So, Nicole, perhaps we can start with you. And so here's the scenario. So if we look at the context of outside of actually raising money from grants or donations, and we look at trading. So here's the scenario. So I'm working in a nonprofit. We're doing work that really matters, but we're desperate to increase funding. And so we're looking at generating our own income, maybe through workshops or other services. And it's fantastic because it can be another source of operating income. But we're worried about it putting our tax-exempt status at risk. So can you help unpack this for us? Are we doing the right thing? What are the lines that we can't cross? And could we be jeopardizing our compliance just to try and stay financially sustainable?
This is a question that just keeps cropping up. What do they call it? The hardy annual that keeps coming out of the ground and being asked. And it's actually a question that should have been put to bed way back in 2006 when the law changed. So up until 2006, you might have had reason to be nervous about your trading income and the extent of it and the nature of it and that kind of thing. And that was because if you went outside of certain boxes, you were not permitted as a public benefit organization to conduct that trading activity outside of certain limits. You might have lost your PBO status, but what people used to do back before 2006 was that they would then set up a subsidiary PTY. They would do whatever trading that they thought was going to jeopardize their PBO status in that separate PTY, and then they would feed back to the nonprofit after tax profits in the way of dividends, right? However, in the year 2006, and I think this was a kind of a really sensible move by SARS, because I think they saw that it was a weird kind of artificial distinction going on with this trading, non-trading thing, and that it was really impacting on the sector. So effectively what happened is that there was a major change in the way SARS deals with this, and PBO status became partial tax-exempt status. And this is something that's not widely understood. But what happened is that they took the old absolute limits and said, okay, if you play outside of these limits, which you can do now without jeopardizing your status, you might pay tax on the profits. Okay. So the previously offending, potentially, trading income can now be brought back home to the mothership, into the non-profit, and you might have to make provision to pay tax on some of the profits of what's called taxable trading income, but it doesn't in any way jeopardize your tax-exempt status. The one rider I must say here, though, is that remember that a non-profit which has PBO status is meant to be spending its energy and its funds in pursuit of its objects. So much as there can be funding drives that are set up, and there are all sorts of fundraising things or events, or perhaps there's some kind of passive income coming out of a property that you own, if you shift entirely so that you are now a business, effectively, and you're not carrying out your PBO objectives anymore, then you would lose your PBO status. But it's not about the extent or the nature of the trading that you do. It's about what your focus is and what your purpose is. There is nuance in this, nuance that's too detailed to answer right here in this scenario, I think. But the bottom line is, if as a public benefit organization you are earning any income, doing any trading, charging for services, whatever it might be, you need to have a look at the detail and decide whether you're going to declare your trading income as non-taxable trading income, which is certainly possible. And I would say school fees paid to a school generally would be treated as non-taxable trading income, or whether it goes outside of those limits and you need to declare it as taxable trading income and make provision to perhaps to pay tax on any profits. For organizations that had previously set up and excised the trading from their central body, it's actually beneficial to bring that trading activity back into the mothership, into the public benefit organization, because as a PBO, you get a nice initial exempt portion even on your taxable trading income. And that is the equivalent of 5% of all of your income, including donated income, passive income, or 200,000 Rand, whichever is greater. So bottom line, it's not a problem to trade as long as you're still doing what you set out to do on the whole. And you just need to be aware of the detail of the nuance and know how to classify that trading income and whether you might need to make provision to pay tax. Ricardo, have I left anything out that's crucial?
No, that's very comprehensive. And the reality is that organizations should pursue trading activities in order to boost their income. That just aligns with the whole concept of sustainability.
Yep.
And even though it's a bit technical, there's been an interpretation of that SARS as published, and organizations must engage with that. And Nicole, I'm sure you've presented as well on the trading activities. So wonderful resources you've written on the Income Tax Act as well. So yeah, it's just it can significantly impact the sustainability of an organization.
Thank you both. And I wonder if, Nicole, are there any examples you'd like to give, just to sort of unpack this with an organization that you've worked with, that just to bring this to life for our listeners, of the kinds of trading activities that you are seeing organizations doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of if you're looking for examples of income that might be seen by SARS as taxable trading income, one of the things that clearly identified is rental income. So if, for instance, you have a community hall where you run training and you're letting that out as a wedding venue on the weekends, that is not integral, and it doesn't satisfy the tests to be non-taxable trading income, and you would pay tax on that rental income. And that's actually something that often organizations are not knowing and not getting right. And then the other thing is that if you are offering a service into, say, consulting services or training services, and you are doing so on a basis where either you're building in a nice flat profit margin, and because you want to use that nice flat profit margin to sustain the work of the nonprofit, or you are maybe kind of undercutting other people that you're competing with in the market, who are tax-paying entities, then in that case, you might have to say, okay, this is going to be taxable trading income. We might have to pay tax on the profit of this, on this part of the income. So whereas as I said, an example is school fees. School fees, it's charging school fees if the activity is related to what you're doing. It's dead central. You're not making a kind of an undue large margin. Schools normally kind of run break even. And so far, so good. SARS isn't seeing you as competing with schools which are actually for profits. It's generally regarded as non-taxable trading income. So I don't know if those are useful.
Great. That really helps. Thank you for that. Let's move on to another area that I think, regularly and especially more recently is getting a lot of non-profit leaders anxious, and that's around AI and POPIA. So Ricardo, perhaps you can help us unpack this. So let me do another scenario. So we're, like many other organizations, using AI tools more regularly, particularly transcription software. We're using it to record and summarize our internal meetings. And often we're discussing sensitive beneficiary cases. And of course, this all saves a lot of time. But someone recently asked us, are we violating POPIA by doing this? By sending data to an external server that we can't control. So can you help us understand how we can use AI safely? And so, even though we're using it internally, are we crossing any legal lines by using these tools?
So, Sarah, that's a very, very important question. And maybe just to link it to your initial question as to, our involvement or my involvement with the sector, and I'm sure Nicole can relate. And that's the fact that, oftentimes we expected to interpret certain legal developments and make it relevant for non-profit organizations. Unfortunately, often the lawmakers do not take non-profits specifically into account. Our clients come to us and they ask us to make meaning out of, developments that are taking place. So AI is a significant development. Currently, our legal system, we don't have artificial intelligence act. So we have to interpret the existing laws and, determine to what extent it is applicable in terms of AI operations. So that's not straightforward. Even the information regulators said what's there at the moment is not sufficient. So they need to look at how AI should be governed. So it's both a governance and a legal issue. But we have to consider the question within the current context, right? So when we look at POPIA, it's got one section that deals with definitions, and those definitions are quite wide. So even, when we engage in meetings, a lot of organizations are now doing virtual meetings. And inevitably, as these platforms upgrade, you have the AI functionality added to, like Zoom meetings, right? So AI is part of that. It's recording in terms of POPIA. When people are participating in Zoom meetings, it's personal information. So even that meeting or the recording would form part, even though you may not use AI note takers, that forms part of POPIA. So the question that is posed is actually broadly applicable to many of the processes where personal information is being recorded within the organization. So it's an important question, but how do you address the question? There should be a particular approach and framework that is adopted. And I think POPIA, it provides a very useful guidance in that regard. One of the requirements that organizations, all of us processing personal information when we operate businesses, non-profits, so it's not exclusively applicable to non-profits, but we need to have a personal information or conduct a personal information impact assessment. Now, that could be broad enough to include artificial intelligence. There's a specific term that's being used with AI, they call it artificial intelligence impact assessment. And the intention is basically that you make an organization-wide assessment or conduct an assessment to determine to what extent.
Sorry, can you repeat what that term is called? And then carry on. I think, I don't know if it was on your side, Sarah, but I just heard like a cup full or something like that. But just say that term again, please. Start from there.
Yes.
Thank you.
So there's a specific term called artificial intelligence impact assessment, where you actually do an assessment in terms of how artificial intelligence would impact on the operations of the organization, including in, this particular question where we talk about sensitive beneficiary cases, external servers, and assuming there's no control or you cannot control it, but there is some form of control, at least that the organization can take in this kind of context. So, for example, the organization can decide which service provider it's going to use. It also can decide the training that is being conducted within the organization. It can decide on which policies are being presented in terms of AI. And I'm saying this not to try and make it complicated, but just to say, firstly, artificial intelligence at this stage should be an item on any board's agenda, any organization. Right? So if, for example, the organization is saying, well, we don't use artificial intelligence, I can almost assure you that you will be used by artificial intelligence within the organization, right? Because at some point, it is now part of the organization. So just to give an example, if an organization does not consider, the implications of AI, nowadays, inevitably, if you host a virtual meeting, you'll find the AI note taker coming to the meeting, right? Somebody's AI note taker is now in the queue. And usually they're first in the queue. They're punctual, they're on time. So they're there, right? So suppose you're the administrator. You're now supposed to govern who's got access. If there's no policy, who's got access, then that person has to make a call, right? So you might have 3 AI note takers, right, coming to the meeting, and suppose they all now, because the administrator is a kind person and the AI note takers are admitted. So the AI note takers, they're present, they take notes. Now, I've been in a situation where there's a portion where there's a confidential matter being discussed, and you actually ask some people to excuse themselves due to the nature of the discussions. They may have an interest, but they have to be excused. Now, that's being done, but the AI note takers are there. So the intention is that portion shouldn't be accessible to others. But if that's not governed, if the AI note takers are not casted out of the meeting, notes are being taken, and the note takers will send the notes to everyone that's been at the meeting. So inevitably, information that was not meant for certain of the participants at the meeting inevitably got shared. Now, who's supposed to provide the guidance in that regard? It's the board of the organization. The board is supposed, and you have control. I've seen increasingly boards are now issuing policies, and increasingly they say, look, there's only one official note taker, AI note taker. Now, there's a benefit in doing that, right? But secondly, we don't make use of these free service providers, because once we, have a paid service, we have more control in terms of providing access. Now, I'm not saying every platform provides that, but that's part of the research that we have to do, where we take control and we ensure that it's not so much the external service providers, because a lot of information gets stored on external service providers. That's not part of the practice. But the question is, to what extent do we take control and do we manage that process? Poppia talks about technical and organizational measures. What is clear in terms of AI is that it goes beyond IT. So it's not an IT function. It's now a governance function, and it's got legal implications for the organizations. And the reality is that we need to equip ourselves. It's a wonderful opportunity, but it comes with risks. So the concept of risk management in terms of the King report, twofold: negative side, and there's a positive side. One of the positive sides in terms of AI in this context is that, we can have reports produced fairly quickly, fairly accurately nowadays, depending on what platform you use. But there are risks involved. And unless we navigate those risks responsibly, our organizations are at risk. Thank you, Sarah.
Sure. It's a complex and tricky area for us to navigate. I wonder, Nicole, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
Just that I'm with Ricardo, I boot AI out of every meeting that I'm in, just for this reason. It's rude; they weren't invited, and also, I just think that in a meeting, whether it's now I'm talking about online consultations with clients, but board meetings too, there needs to be a free and open exchange of ideas. And I think the idea that every single thing that you say is being recorded is an inhibitor of that natural kind of discourse that needs to happen at board level. Boards actually need to sometimes argue about things. They need to debate them fiercely, and then they need to be able to change their minds. And your problem is, and I found this sometimes in note-taking in legal advice situations, is the note-taker picks up on something that you might have said very emphatically in the beginning, and then you change your mind. You said, okay, now you've told me this. Actually, it's that. And I just don't trust the AI yet to be able to distinguish between those things. And so I will routinely ban AI from any meeting I'm in, and say we're taking our own notes, and we'll provide you with a summary at the end. And I think boards need to think about, is there an inhibiting factor in having AI recording meetings, especially when it's not under your control, and you can't at the end go back and say, okay, this portion was confidential, that's not going in the minutes, we'll just say this was decided. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really practical advice and very empowering for anybody listening when it feels overwhelming, like, how do I deal with this? I think, Ricardo, the other question is around using AI where we're putting information into these incredibly powerful systems and asking it to help us make sense of things. What are the rules there around the kind of data you share with the likes of ChatGPT and others? Are there any tips that you could share with our listeners around do's and don'ts when using these free AI tools?
Yes. So if we just take, for example, for the most part, we use Microsoft, right, on our computers. Now, effectively, AI is now embedded in those tools. So if we look at Word, it's Copilot is right there. It's part of the package, and it's almost inescapable that we will process personal information with the aid of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Zoom, again, it's embedded in there. We process personal information. We cannot escape it, but we can be selective in terms of what platforms we use for what purposes. My exposure to AI about 2 years ago, or just over a year ago, I attended the annual general meeting of the Law Society of South Africa in Nicole's home ground, KZN. Eye-opening, because at that stage I was so overwhelmed in terms of the demands, in terms of AI, with work practice-related AI. But when I attended the training, I realized that actually what was quite overwhelming for me, I was able to manage it with the assistance of AI. Wonderful tool. But the advice we were given as lawyers is that do not put personal information into free platforms. Make sure you scrutinize the terms and conditions, right, in terms of how that information will be used. In fact, the recommendation was by the presenter, who also an attorney focusing on IT, was saying, look, he is using Microsoft Copilot because that's it's a global company. They're bound by, the EU regulations, and he has actually scrutinized their terms and conditions. And so, in any case, you cannot escape it if you're working on like Word, PowerPoint, Excel. That's the reality. So that's a fairly safe approach, right, in terms of AI. But it requires any other platform. Organizations will have to ensure that they avoid using free services because it's not really free. It comes at a price. Now, especially when we talk about personal information, they're harvesting that information. But it's no mistake that these AI note takers send their notes to everybody because they want to monopolize that space, right? So we have to take control in that space. We have to make sure we're selective. We define clearly in the organization which service providers we use, especially in relation to personal information. The risk is lower if we do general research. Then we can experiment, and we can do that, but once we insert personal information, we have to be selective. And the reality is that, like I said, if you work on a computer, you use Word, AI is there. You cannot escape it. So you cannot extract personal information out of Word, and it's being saved, in the cloud. So that is happening, but we have to navigate that space, very, very carefully. And even AI is now, like I said, it's on the Draft King report. So it's a wonderful learning experience. Just the last comment on that. When I attended that AGM, I made a decision to subscribe to 2 platforms after I've done my research. And it's got cost implications. So likewise for nonprofits, it's got cost implications. The more you're going to use AI, the more it's going to impact on your budget, but it's also going to impact on your efficiency, your productivity. But we have to consider now at this stage what are the risks? What are the opportunities? And the time is now. We can do it 2 years afterward, but I think the opportunities are now for organizations to be very deliberate. So I would say at the first port of call, make sure that it's on the board's agenda. Yeah. It's a requirement. If it's not there, it's problematic. And then secondly, provide training. Thanks, Sarah.
Ricardo, you just emphasizing such a critical point here that even though we're in the space of social impact, doing good, does not negate our obligations to comply. And being small, being underfunded is no excuse. And maybe I can just hop to one of the other questions that have come up as we're putting this podcast together is all around the information officer. So as we've been talking about POPIA and PIA, which is, that as NGOs or as nonprofits, we're compliant. We have to be compliant with these pieces of legislation, and we're required to have an information officer. So you were saying there that the boards are responsible, but equally every organization has to have PIA documentation, has to have policies, and there has to, even if you're a tiny organization, we have to invest in this. Wonder if you could just make a quick comment on that around information officer compliance.
Sure. So broadly, in my view, there are 3 themes that, in terms of our current context, the one is risk, other one is information, and the third one is compliance, RIC, right? So the issue of information falls squarely, personal information in terms of POPIA, and it's been in operation since 2021, and nonprofits process personal information, right? So there's no exclusion or exception to the rule. They process personal information. In terms of the POPIA, they must appoint a public, an information officer who is responsible for certain activities within the organization, including information awareness sessions and what I referred to earlier in terms of this personal information impact assessment. Now, there's some material in the public domain available to organizations. And the reality is that organizations must engage with those compliance obligations. Now, what has happened, there's a focus on integration, and it's as a result of South Africa's grey listing, in 2023. The spotlight has been on organizations. There's been a spotlight on information in terms of beneficial information. So those three themes are playing out at the moment. Organizations that are taking those themes into account and that are addressing those themes, in my view, ultimately they will position themselves in terms of resource mobilization and donor support. So when we look at the information officer, what has happened this year, in fact, was, the Companies Commission, they've got several portals where they provide information about the companies, the directors. They have now integrated with the information regulator. So if your company, if the non-profit company if you're part of a non-profit company, then you can check on their BIS portal sign. There's a section that talks about the information regulator. And if the information officer has not been registered, then they will indicate that, right? So by implication, a third party can come and check on their site and see, has the person been registered? And their assumption is, if the person has not been registered, if there's no information officer registered, the organization is non-compliant with the Act. Now, that is not a good sign for your potential supporters. Also, there's another portion where they talk about the PIA reports, that if the organization hasn't submitted the report, they'll indicate it's not 2024, 2025. So the longer the organization doesn't submit the reports, the longer that list will get. And if you haven't, let's say, made requests in terms of PIA or received requests in terms of PIA, it can literally take you 15 minutes to register both your information officer and also to submit a report to the information regulator in terms of PIA. It's not that complicated. And so it can be done fairly easily. But the reality is organizations must pay attention to this. Some of the items must be on the board's agenda. And I've been saying it for a couple of years now that PIA, for example, it should be now an item on the board's agenda. Some of it's not easy. Nicole can tell you, even in terms of legal practitioners, there's more compliance obligations on us. That is the reality. Tax practitioners, we're not getting away from it. So non-profits, like I said, they've been in the spotlight and they're going to stay in the spotlight, unfortunately. But there are opportunities as part of that being in the spotlight, because it's the organizations paying attention to these key governance and legal developments. And I would say subscribe. Nicole has got a newsletter. #nonprofit has got a newsletter. Valuable information being circulated to nonprofits. Some choose to not pay attention. Those that are paying attention, those are the ones that will become increasingly sustainable. Thank you, Sheila.
Great. Very wise words. Nicole, anything to add to that before we move on to the next question?
Yeah. So, thanks, Ricardo. I've just learned a whole lot of stuff about stuff that my brain doesn't want to pay attention to because it seems like it's going to be boring. And I think that's it's the kind of thing where people are, all nonprofit leaders and boards and people, they're out in the field, they're rolling up their sleeves, they're getting real stuff done, and they're like, what the actual is this, really? So it's an irritation. And the thing is, though, you can't just put your hands over your ears and go, yada, 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 because it's going to come and bite you. And as Ricardo said, it's actually easy to take those steps and comply. It's a 1, 2, 3 thing. One little other note is that there's an email notification going around which has all my clients freaking out. I don't know if you've seen it, Ricardo. It comes from PIA, and it says non-compliance, and it's got red stuff all over it. Because you get that email doesn't mean you're non-compliant. It's just a notice from them to say that if you do this or that, or don't do this or that, you will be non-compliant. So relax, don't freak out, don't just delete that email. In fact, with all compliance things, don't freak out. Just take a breath and just get the thing done that needs to be done. Because as Ricardo said, it's not a good look. And I've had organizations contact me to say, I've just had a donor who's asked me, why is this showing on my Biz Portal profile?
Thanks, Nicole. So let's move on to legal structures. It's an area that you are both extremely familiar with. And choosing the right legal structure is so important. So let me share another scenario with you. So this is an organization that's a trust. Their founding trustees, though, barely engage with the work and don't come to meetings. But they have, of course, signing powers on the bank account. Some of the trustees have also resigned, but they haven't sent letters of resignation. Now, we've tried to sort things out. We've sent documents to the master 3 times, and it's been 2 years, and we've had no response from the master, and it feels like our organization is being held hostage. So we know that this is partly a governance issue, but the trust structure makes everything harder. So in your opinion, have we chosen the wrong legal entity? And what would it take to change it? And is it even worth trying? So can you help us understand the different entities are and what they mean?
Yep. So, and this is also, Ricardo will know as well, this is something that is just becoming a question that we're getting all the time from people. And it is because, and I have been saying in 30 years that the master of the High Court office is dysfunctional, and every year you think it can't possibly get worse, and it does. It's got much worse. So the quick answer to the question is that when this organization was set up, when many organizations were set up, the trust probably was the correct choice. It was the appropriate choice of legal entity. Because prior to the year 2000, if you wanted a tightly held or top-driven or board-only type of organization, say you're a foundation, you're going to be looking after money, or you're looking after property, or you've got a very particular vision that needs a particular expertise. In other words, you're not grassroots-driven, community-driven, like a membership-based organization. At that stage, prior to the year 2000, the trust was literally your only appropriate legal choice. And that is because the other 2 legal choices, which are voluntary associations and the old Section 21 company under the previous Companies Act, both of those have to have members. And so they've got an internal accountability mechanism built into them where there's a broader group of members. There's an AGM every year. If the board doesn't behave and doesn't deliver, you're off, new people are on, right? That's the kind of triangle, the pyramid structure of a voluntary association or Section 21. So up until the year 2000, I'd say my filing cabinet was like 90% trusts because those were the kinds of clients I was mostly looking after at the time. Now, however, with the advent of the new Companies Act, there's the innovation of what they're calling the no members NPC. So the old Section 21 has been replaced by the NPC, the non-profit company. And when you set up a non-profit company, you can choose to go with a with members model, like your Section 21 company, or you can set up a no members NPC. I have not set up a new trust since the year 2000. And that is because finally we had an electronic, online, quick turnaround, responsive system, which is the new company's online system. And the comparison between that and your take out your pen and everybody sign with a pen on the same piece of paper and then send it to the master of the High Court, where they'll probably lose it, and then you'll have to do it again 3 years later. It's just, people are just over it. They're utterly over it. And look, the master of the High Court, in the wake of actually the impetus that's come from FATF and the beneficial ownership, and they are trying to upgrade, but Ricardo, how long would you say it's going to be? It is so far behind, and their systems just don't exist. So we couldn't even place a date on that. So the problem, though, is that if you're an existing trust, there is no process of conversion. You can't turn a switch and say, okay, we want to be an NPC, bing, bong, bosh, here we go. The transition to an NPC is a fundamental change. And in fact, we often have voluntary associations coming to us who are pretending to have members. And we say to them, this is not good because you don't have that internal accountability. You can't have the same 3 people voting each other on and off on the board all the time. It's not legitimate. So for those kinds of people, we're sometimes also saying you need to transition to a no members NPC to be authentic and to be what you say on the tin, right? So, but in both of those cases, it's a fundamental transition. And because what you've got to do is you've got to set up that new NPC and you've got to get all its bells and whistles and shiny parts going. It's got to have its PBO status. If it needs to have NPO, it's got to have that NPO status. And that kind of thing is taking 6-8 months at the moment as a whole runway, I would say, maybe longer depending on complexities. And then, so while you do that, you've got to keep your other organization, whether it be a trust or a whatever it is, jogging along next to it. And remember, you will have contracts and obligations and things that are all tied to your bank accounts. So you're starting from something new, from scratch. It has no history, right? So if you've got an issue with donors who want 3 years of financial statements, you have to have a conversation with them and say, we're making this transition. Will you accept, we're the same organization, will you accept those from the previous? So it's not a small thing to do. It's not to be lightly undertaken. However, we are doing it all the time for clients, and it's because there's desperation and there are bank accounts being frozen because letters of authority have not been updated for 2 or 3 years. And you just cannot actually continue to operate under those kinds of circumstances.
Ricardo, anything to add to that?
Well, just to say that very, very well explained, Nicole. That's such a pertinent issue at this moment. It's something that I've also grappled with in terms of some of the questions that some of my clients have posed in light of the existing context. The easier approach now for me, and I'm on the same page with Nicole, I don't recommend setting up a trust at this moment in time. It is not feasible. The difficult part is the transition, as Nicole explained, very comprehensively and accurately. Not an easy decision, but that's unfortunately the reality that many non-profits have to face that have registered as trusts, and it's a sad context within which we are operating. I'm not impressed with the Master's Office, and I have to restrain myself. But I'm in complete agreement. That input from Nicole is so critical for the non-profit sector at this moment in time, because a lot of trusts are battling with that. And extremely valuable insights.
And so it's an arduous process. It's not easy, but when you come out the other end, people are just blessing themselves for doing it, because suddenly when you want to change your board and it takes 2 days for director changes to be registered, you're like, oh my word, this is like paradise compared to what you feel with.
Yeah, so it's worth the pain.
And the other thing here is that the non-profit company, and here this is the thing, the more I work with this New Companies Act and this model, actually the keener I get on it. And it gives your organization a kind of an online status and credibility. And we alluded before to the fact that your non-compliance with Copley and Pire can be reflected. But it also means that somebody can log in and see, oh, you're actually registered. Oh, these directors are who they say they are, who you told us they were. You know what I mean? It's independently verifiable. And also the fact, and some people don't like the NPC because of the annual reporting requirement, and that you have to pay a small fee to stay registered, and that you have to lodge all sorts of documents. Our view is that those annual reporting requirements are things that any organization should be doing anyway. But the rules of the company's office provisions forces organizations to do the admin that they should be doing, which is actually a good thing in the nonprofit sector, because you never have like the lost years of the board that didn't file the reports. Or Ricardo, you're nodding. It's a familiar scenario. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Thank you both. We're coming to the end of our time together, but I want to just finish off with another question that comes up over and over again, and that's with regards to Section 18A tax certificates, but particularly for services that are provided. So a little bit of a grey area. And Nicole, I wonder if you can kick us off. So, how do we deal with, where a professional has offered us free services, maybe strategic planning or legal support, that would normally cost us tens of thousands of rands if we pay the full price. So it's a really wonderful gift. But now they've asked for a Section 18A certificate for the value of their donated time, which we think feels fair to acknowledge, but no actual money has changed hands. So can you just unpack for us around issuing Section 18As for pro bono services, or does this put us at risk? And because of course we don't want to break any rules.
So this is a quick response because it's an easy response, Sarah. Although it's a question that people ask all the time, this is not a grey area. The law is extremely clear on this. You are not permitted to issue 18A receipts for time spent or for services proffered or for volunteered time. It's just not possible. The law is very clear that you can only issue 18 receipts for money that you've received or goods that you've received. And it's very clear on how those goods must be valued. And so it's utterly not permitted. When, as an 18A organization that has 18A status, you are under, in my view, a quite heavy burden. And that burden is that you may only issue 18A receipts in certain circumstances, not when somebody's paying you for services, not when somebody's providing free services, not when it's somebody's. So there are rules, and you need to have, and we get back to policy too, you need to have anybody who's dealing with these receipts needs to have these rules really clear and be able to articulate to the very nice lawyer who's done the free work that unfortunately it's not legally permissible to us, and we'll put our 18A status in jeopardy if we do so. Yeah.
Thanks. Anything to add on that, Ricardo?
Nothing, in complete agreement with what Nicole said.
It's straight and simple. There's no grey area. Thank you for clarifying that. So as we wrap up now, I wonder whether we can just ask you both to share a closing remark about what your best tip of the day would be for not-for-profits in navigating the legal space. Why don't you kick us off first, Ricardo?
Yes, so I like this analogy or illustration. Many years ago, the Almighty came to Solomon and he gave him a proposition. He said, ask of me anything and I'll give it. Solomon responded by saying, give me wisdom to govern and to lead your people. He focused on people, leadership, wisdom, and governance. Now, I think that's a solid foundation for governance in our organization. We need to be clear in terms of where our focus is. And he got an endorsement that evening and he was told, look, you could have asked for property, you could have asked for money, you could have asked for a brand name, honor. You could have asked for, the lives of your enemies, the competitive edge. You could have asked for long life for yourself, sustainability. You asked for none of those things. Your focus was on those four issues, especially with people. Now, I think if that's the foundation within our organizations, it's a solid foundation. There would have been no need for the Zondo permission. And I think it's important for organizations to just be clear. We can have the tick list in terms of policies and all of those things, but if we do not have a solid foundation on governance, we're at risk. And that, for me, I must say, it's also the foundation for sustainability, because we're now in a space where a lot of things are happening in terms of legal developments, policies, AI, pop here. And some of it looks a bit tedious, but there are opportunities, embedded in that. I mean, I'm venturing out in terms of AI to learn more. It's a rewarding experience. So it's exciting. I think, in the time that I've worked with the nonprofit sector, this is perhaps the most challenging time, but also the most exciting time. And we need to navigate this responsibly. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Ricardo. Nicole?
Yes, I have two thoughts to wrap up. The one is around the compliance and the admin and the legal stuff. And chief tip is don't pretend it doesn't exist. Don't run away from it. Don't be scared of it. It's not actually that hard. It's all there. It's accessible. There are resources. Take deep breaths and get an expert in your corner. Don't just trust ChatGPT. I have to tell you, doesn't always give you the right answers on these sorts of things. You have to have somebody who really knows the answers to be able to tell you whether it's right. But then in terms of what my heart would love to see for the nonprofit sector, and I know Ricardo and I are on the same page on this one, and that is, can we just work together, people? Can we, instead of thinking of each other as competitors for scarce resources, for funding, for attention, can we lean into our relationships and not only gather together when we have a crisis? Can we support one another as organizations? Can we collaborate? Can we share our learnings? Sharing our learnings with each other is free except for the time spent. People say it's hard to get somebody to come onto our board. Can we just cross-pollinate from our boards? Our boards, if we've got an old budgie board that's been there for too long and they're a bit stuck, get some new board members on, but harvest them from other boards. Let them circulate and learn new things. Anyway, full of ideas, but mostly let's lean together. And I just think that is the strongest way for the nonprofit sector to weather any storm.
Wonderful, and very sage words from both of you. And that brings us to the end of today's conversation. A huge thank you to our guests, Nicole and Ricardo. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your wisdom, and your insights with us. This episode was brought to you by #nonprofit with support from the LV and Ivy Middleton Charitable Trust, whose contribution makes this work possible. Now, if you found this discussion helpful, please share it with your networks and keep an eye and an ear out for future episodes where we'll continue to explore the big questions facing our sector. So thank you, and until next time, take care, and especially thank you for all that you do.